The other experiences with stepfather and my grandmother, but basically in the later stages of their lives, they were unable to care for themselves. And to watch that slide into death is pretty traumatic, and I think that you only have to experience it once to know what's going on. We really need some more policy that advocates for more in-home care, some support system that allows people to stay with their families if that is the best thing that can happen, which it usually is, but being able to be paid to care for mentally ill. I think we should really be looking at that.
Brian?
My time's up already. It should be, because I recognize about 90% of the people out here, so the same story, I'm going to talk about again, I've already heard previously at previous candidates' forums. Both sides of my family, parents' family, experienced, mental health care issues. I think some of you are around and dealt with those issues back decades ago when they were institutionalized, put in the state hospital, drug therapy, and all down that road. The one thing that you take away from that, and you bring to the 21st century, it was mentioned earlier here, is having been a military officer, dealt with veterans, dealt with PTSD before it was called PTSD, and then having unfortunately been the deputy commanding officer of the unit who sent the first troops home from Iraq, only to have them the first night have 2 suicides and 1 murder-suicide, and be on the 6 o'clock news the next morning. My takeaway from that, though, that really is important about the first question, and I'll just look right back there at Shirley, is the word perseverance. And the key point about that is that this is an age-old issue. We have made inch by inch forward, and we've done that through perseverance. It is quite true, I have been in the legislature for a decade, and through that perseverance, we have done some fairly significant improvements, and we have a long ways to go. But it's that perseverance at addressing this issue that's going to get us going forward. Yes, there's some sprinkling of money, some bills, everything else like that. And the other thing is your perseverance. You're not electing 4 or 6 people up here to go to the legislature and come back in 2 years. You have to help persevere too.
Thank you. Sharon, we'll start with you on the second question, and that is, assuming you were elected to our state legislature, what do you think are the most important issues to address concerning mental health care in your district and within the state of Oregon?
Particularly affordable, equitable housing. And I think that in Newburgh, I know Kaiser and St. Paul are both in District 25, but I live in Newburgh, so I see that more often than Kaiser or St. Paul yet. But there are strides being made by the churches in town and the great caring people that live there, but it's not enough to expect them to shoulder the responsibility for all the homeless people and people that wander the streets with nowhere to go. And so that is something that we need to reach across party lines in Salem and come to some sort of consensus where we need to start to fix this problem, where we're going to get the funding to do it, who else are we going to tap into to get us funding to find housing for them, find the resources to get them the help that they need, because everybody that's mentally ill doesn't have the same problems. The tendency is, as I've seen it, to, especially in my experience, the VA to, I'm not knocking the VA, but they will throw drugs at things that they shouldn't throw drugs at. They don't have the money and people to spend the time to be with these individuals and find out what's causing the problem. So I think it's a is a multi-layered task. And just like Brian said, it's gonna take a while, but we need to tackle it from more than one side. And we need to sort of find what we can find, but we need everybody. We need everybody in the House of Representatives to come together on this.
Thank you. Ross?
Well, I think I would agree that affordable housing is a great place to start with addressing a lot of these needs. And just a couple thoughts. I've been attending a few of the homeless coalition meetings for Marion, Polk, and Yamhill County. And the one fact they said that they're estimated to have 600 veterans that are homeless in the 3-county area. And it just seems to me that if you have an endless war, you're going to have an endless stream of veterans coming here. So this is a really large problem, and the inequality that is facing people with mental illness, I think really needs to be addressed, especially with housing. I really would like to see these Hoover bills addressed. That's basically what we're looking at now. It's a nationwide problem. We have rampant homelessness. The people who are responsible for taking everyone's money and making everybody else more stressed got away with it, and they took all your money, and they're going to do it again. They are doing it again. We need to resist that by finding new planning for development in rural towns. And if we could change zoning in the rural towns to encourage multi-dwelling units and not go out to suburbia with our money, because that is a liability that's long-term. It's never going to pay back. So what we need to do is think outside the box, get some tiny homes in these rural communities, and we need to address the affordable housing situation.
Thank you. Brian?
Well, I'm going to start off with the money issue because 2 years ago I was quoted, you can't throw $300 million at this problem and it's going to fix it. But the ironic portion is we did throw $300 million at this program. The legislature put in $50 million in 2013 into expanding programs in the rural area. And the Affordable Care Act, if you're on one side, Obamacare, if you're on the other, pick your poison, put about $250 million into the mental health care system here in Oregon. The interesting thing is we can't find it. And that's the bottom line. Every report, Senator Courtney and both have asked for OHA to come back with a more in-depth explanation of where the funds went through. What literally happened is that when we passed legislation to move and expand rural health care and rural mental health care specifically, there was money that came out of the Federal Affordable Care Act that came into the state of Oregon. But everybody should go and ask whether it's a nonprofit at the top or whether it's a corporation at the top, it's what we backfilled. And we had to use those services to backfill. I can attest to you, and I think you would attest to me, that we haven't seen that much expansion in Yamhill County or any of the counties that anybody here is running for. And the question is what happened to the money and where did it go to? That's step one. Step two is to continue with perseverance and move down the road. Ross is absolutely right. Even on the Revenue Committee, ironically enough, several of the bills that were mentioned here come through the Revenue Committee, which I'm the vice chair of. And even in looking at that, you turn around and say affordable health care. You can't build any affordable housing or have any affordable health care in Portlandia. It's too bloody expensive. What Ross is suggesting and what others have suggested is the exact same thing, is you can go back out into the rural communities that are out there that can absorb it, and actually you can build affordable housing out in that area, and you can deliver affordable services in that area. And that's the direction we need to go. We need to migrate out of the Portlandia area. We need to find where the money is, and we need to put it back into the rural communities where the problems are at.
Thank you. Ken?
As I've attended NAMI meetings here at the Abacus House for the past few years, I hear over and over from the families that are there that there is help for those people that are below a certain income level. DHS has services to meet the needs to some level. But above that line, you're on your own, for the most part. And that is the concern. The question is about what are the issues? And that's what I've heard from my local community, that it's expensive to have someone suffering from mental illness in your family. The next thing, I was out knocking on doors, and I knocked on Chief Brian Casey's door at the Newburgh Police Department, and I said, Brian, tell me what you want to tell me. And he said, hey, mental illness has been dumped on the doorstep of law enforcement, and we need emergency beds. And I think he said 200. So anyway, a lot. We need that a lot. And he also said, we need 24-hour crisis intervention responders, those people that come to help police officers deal with someone in a mental crisis. And I'm not an expert on mental illness and how all this needs. I'm just talking about my own experience. A door I knocked on, meetings I've gone to, but there are people who are experts that are putting together that quality program that I would look to help implement. The Behavioral Health Mapping Tool Technology Advisory Committee. Those are the folks that are the experts that I will look to find my compass on how I can help.
Thank you. Ron?
So what do we need in this district? I applaud Brian and Ken for both bringing it up. When I started law enforcement, I didn't think that we would become, I guess, lay mental health professionals, because that is what's happened to police officers. And if that's the role that needs to happen, then we need to provide a training and experience to do that. In this particular area, we have, as I mentioned before, a crisis, because although county and Silas has done a great job of providing a couple of crisis responders, partnership with George Fox University in counselors and crisis responders, we still have a gap. And Peter can tell you what happens to his emergency room when people are in crisis and several beds get taken up because there's no place to put people to get help. And that doesn't do anybody good. It doesn't do our community good. It doesn't do the person in crisis any good. We need to start, as I mentioned before, investing in programs that prevent crisis and coming alongside people. My wife works in home health, and as Jim Thompson mentioned before, we sometimes think of medical health and mental health as two separate things, and it's not. The people she deals with, the stories that she comes across are people that are experiencing both physical issues and mental health issues, and they need assistance. We need to start, if I had a magic wand, and I probably use that phrase too much, but I would say we need to invest directly in the people who provide service, those nonprofits that I mentioned, as opposed to sending our money to Salem First and having it re-doled out or not re-doled out if we can't find where it went. But we need to come up with a solution that communities can address the issues in the communities and provide services to the people who need help. And instead of dumping it on law enforcement when people get into crisis.
Jim?
First, I want to ditto what Senator Boquist said. He's absolutely right, and add one thing to it. We have to remember that the legislature passes budgets and writes policy. We don't hire and fire. And one of the things we need desperately is leadership from the governor's office on down to take what we've tried to do and implement it in a way that gets results. It's discouraging when you pass a bill that you think is going to help, and then you find out actually nothing happened or nothing measurable happened. It wasn't the intent of the legislature and the hours of hearings that went into it. Beyond that, my concern is access. We need to be able to connect people who need help to that help. And I think that counties are doing a remarkably better job with their mental health programs than they were. The problem is they're not clinics in the walk-in sense. So there's a void between somebody sitting on a park bench needing help and getting through the door of a mental health facility where that help may reside, although it's in short supply. Beyond that, once you've identified these people, we need to make sure they get adequate care. and that includes a healthcare wraparound? Do they have adequate and sometimes supervised housing? Do they have adequate nutrition available to them? And do they have the rest of the healthcare package they need? It's not good enough to provide them with some mental health care and turn them back on the street homeless. The other thing I think we've got to realize, and it's very apparent to law enforcement, and I've talked to the sheriff, all the sheriffs in my district about it, jails are not drug treatment and mental health facilities. The jails are filled with people that were brought there last night in crisis, or they've been there for a while because some knucklehead committed some kind of a crime while they were in a crisis or needed help. And they end up in jail as a result of not getting treated, and that's not right.
Thank you. Mike?
So, and I don't have all the answers either or anything like that, but, you know, some of that money, that's state and federal money, you know, made it down to the counties. I know I live in Polk County, so I'm familiar with that. Polk County has a bigger budget for mental health than they do for law enforcement. And so, but I'm not sure that it's being spent correctly. You know, I see a lot of this kind of thing, that the money goes to hire a bureaucracy, and it doesn't actually go to provide services. And so I think we can do a better job on that. You know, my district's very rural, and so I hear a lot about veterans' mental health, and that's important to me, and that's something that needs to be addressed. And I think we're doing a little bit better on that, but there's still a lot of room for progress on that. One of the things that always puzzles me is in every city, not even in the large cities, but you have a collection of homeless people that seems to be at ground zero in the middle of the city. And you know, again, not being an expert or anything like that, but that's not a good place to put that phenomenon there. It's not good for the people that need the services, because they're there, and there's all sorts of temptations that are around there that aren't necessarily good for them, and it's not good for the economy of that area. And I almost wish we could locate the soup kitchens kind of on the outskirts of town, and I'd be happy to put a part of my rural district for that. But and where there's healthier environments and access to services, concentrated access to services. So there may be a solution in there also.
Thank you. We're on to our last formal question, but I'll remind the audience, after the question and answer period given by the candidates, we will take audience written questions. So there are some cards over there to write your questions down. Please do so and get them to Fred or Rob. Final question. What are your ideas for providing mental health services to the parts of Oregon that are underserved? Jim, we'll start with you.
Well, to expand that question, it has to include what are we going to do about providing healthcare services to rural Oregon that are underserved. I've been a champion when I was in the legislature of the rural clinic system, and we've made some headway with that, but we need to do a lot more. And again, it comes back to access. You have to have health care, including mental health access points, that are properly staffed and are prepared to deal with these people, whatever their needs are, and pass them on up the line if the community health care center can't deal with them, or they need some other service. But we simply don't have the access points to make it happen. And the more rural you are, the more difficult that is. Deschutes County tackled this a number of years ago and put in a small but very effective mental health unit with, I think at that time it had 6 beds, and I think they've expanded since then, for the mental health part of their rural health care program. And it was wildly successful from the get-go. We need a lot more of that. And then when you add in the problems of mental health combined with self-treatment drug addiction, now you've got a real nightmare on your hands. And it's not just simply, bring this person in, give them some counseling, and they're out the door. You've got to have a continued support system and a plan. And we don't have a plan for most of these people. So one of the one of the issues that I think we have to deal with in all of Oregon, including rural Oregon, is first of all, we have to stop messing around and start finding out who these people are. We know a lot of people suffer from mental health problems, and we connect them into a zone called homeless or something like that. No, who are they? Who are these people? What do they need for help? And what are we spending money on that's being spent around what their real problem is? And that's a huge issue.
Thank you. Mike?
So we kind of have a great opportunity right now. And this isn't my idea, and it's maybe not even something that I would have even suggested that we do. We have these CCOs, these community care organizations, which is the new way, the Obamacare way of delivering Medicaid services. And one of the things that they're trying to do is they're trying to integrate health services. I'm sure all of you know about this, but they're trying to integrate health services, and I think that this might work, it might not work, it might be better. It's probably better than the old fee-for-service iceberg that we have, where you just go and you just get a service, and then they turn it out, and you come back tomorrow and get another service. So, but there's some things that we're going to discover by doing this, this thing. So I think this is a promising experiment to do, and I think for possibly all of healthcare, but maybe especially for mental health care, where you can integrate it with other services. So we'll see how that works, and I'm hopeful that we've got something that we can get to work here.
Thank you. Sharon?
I am totally with, I think it was either Mike or Jim that mentioned getting to know these people, not just recognizing that they're people with a problem, but actually meeting them and talking to them and trying to find out what the problem is, and then directing them. And I think it's a great idea. When I was taking a tour with a psychiatric doctor at OHSU a few months ago, he was saying that what they are looking into with the CCO that Mike mentioned is looking into putting small walk-in clinics in rural areas and small towns, and it'd be rural, but small towns, where these people can be taken, evaluated, and then based on what the evaluation is, they can be placed if they need further care, if they need a place to stay, if they need medication, whatever it is, they need to be recognized, treated like a human being, because they are, and then evaluated and moved on into the system that can help them. But it's going to take, again, what someone else said, it's going to take planning to do that. I think the plans are already discussed, and hopefully we can move that on to fruition so that we can actually do some good. Instead of talking about it, we can just do it.
Thank you. Ross?
Well, I always see people saying lately, let's make America great again. And I keep wondering, I think America's pretty great already, but what time period could they be talking about? And I thought maybe it was the greatest generation, right? These people lived through 2 world wars, a depression. They built the largest economy in the world, the largest middle class in the world. And when confronted with a bunch of problems in the depression, they totally changed their approach on how they did policy. Now, when our first farm had a Roosevelt barn on it, is anybody familiar with what a Roosevelt barn is? These are farms that the government made and built through the CCC, the Works Progress Administration, that actually resettled, they were part of the Resettlement Administration. So it got people to go rural, and that's something we should look at. Another project was the Writers Project, right? And also the cultural and theater projects. These type of ideas where basically they pay people minimum wage to go take oral history of different towns and different citizens. These are, outside the box, but they've been done before. And the same effort can be made with mental health and the housing problems and our cultural deficits. I really think that it's a very, very large effort that nobody can really see right now, but we've done it before. And I think we need to draw on that history to help solve our problems.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, I think the question is what new ideas do you have that are out there? And so I'm not gonna talk about new ideas. You can hear me, right? No, they can hear me, right? I can scream too if you want me to, because that's what it takes to get anything done. I can just go, Ross, you guys should be louder. Ross has pointed out, some of the affordable housing issues that are out there, which are new ideas. 2 years ago, the legislature, the bipartisan group of the legislature, which worked together, put a 6-year plan out there. Some of you are very familiar with this. It was actually Senate Bill 823. There was funding put against this. Interesting enough, there was law enforcement program and law enforcement training put into it, and the Oregon Health Authority, which is an executive branch entity, failed miserably across the board. And once again, two Democrats and 2 Republicans had to bring them in, beat them about their head and shoulders, because colleagues at the table, that's about the only authority you have is to browbeat them. And we jump-started it, put it back over Bureau for DPSD, and we're trying to move this thing forward. Hence lies the problem that we have for ideas. This group can come up with ideas, but once we put the idea on the table, it's the executive branch and everybody else that has to do it. In order to be successful for those ideas going forward, we're 2 years into the 6-year plan, is we have to go back in a bipartisan nature, both Democrats and Republicans, and independents or whoever's in the legislature, and hold the executive branch accountable. There's money out there. I mean, I hear it at the table. We don't want to spend more money, but there's money out there that has been allocated, and the question is, where did it go? And you can't even get a straight answer, and if you do get a straight answer, you'll get it from 6 different people, and it'll be 6 different answers. And that happens on a routine basis on the issue of healthcare, because it is the 800-pound gorilla in the Capitol. $19 billion of the budget goes to the Oregon Health Authority and to fund supposedly affordable healthcare. The number one issue in this district sitting right here is the lack of affordable healthcare. So we have to hold the other side of the branch, these legislators, and get the executives and hold them accountable so that we can actually get the services that are supposed to be provided back out into rural area.
Thank you. Ken?
And the question is about improving services in underserved areas. If you look at the map of mental health delivery in the state, most of the state is considered underserved. Underserved how? Let me just take one example. Underserved by psychiatrists. Do you have a psychiatrist? Do you have enough psychiatrists? Lincoln County has no psychiatrists. They're underserved. All the counties have trouble with wait times in getting prescriptions from psychiatrists up to 9 weeks. And in this intervening time, emergency room visits happen. So it's time to revisit the bill that was passed by the House and the Senate and vetoed by Governor Kulongoski that allowed psychologists with 2 years additional training to prescribe medication. Let's go back and look at that. This will address one issue about how to cure this problem being underserved. The other program that's out there now that's working well with adults with developmental disabilities is this brokerage house idea, where in one place there are services for transportation, housing, job training, crisis beds. Let's apply that same model to mental illness, and starting with a program for children. Transportation, part of the transportation package. As knocking on doors, I hear a big outcry for better bus systems, and that will help get those who need services to the places where they can be served.
Thank you, Ron.
Yes, I think when we say underserved, we're thinking Eastern Oregon, but right here in Yamhill County, we're underserved. And my example is a little different, but I think it makes the same point. When I was a police officer in Corvallis, we had the blessing of Good Samaritan Hospital, which actually provides services to those in crisis for mental illness. I had no idea what I had, because when I moved to McMinnville, we have nothing. And in fact, if it wasn't for Silas and his cooperation with George Fox and putting some other things out there, we would continue to see the emergency room, sometimes 2, sometimes 9 beds, waiting to see if they could be placed maybe in Salem, if there was a bed available, or anywhere else in the state, depending on how the crisis, how critical it was. So I consider right here in this district a place where we are way underserved. There are a lot of possible solutions. You know, I mentioned my family's in healthcare. As my son, the physical therapist, and my daughter-in-law, the nurse, and my son, who's an intern at OHS, you are looking at where to practice. They look at the advantages given to those and the incentives out there to practice in rural areas. And I don't know, quite honestly, if we have the same incentives for healthcare or mental health providers. I think that's one place to start, to maybe encourage people to move to rural areas. We need to change the stigma of what people in mental health crisis and what their needs are, so that communities can come together and work together and create more peer support groups and community support groups for these people who need interaction with people on a regular basis to help them stay steady. And then Senator Boquist brought up the reinfusion of dollars back into DPSST. That is happening. I'm on a work group that's considering having police training include CIT or crisis intervention training as part of the curriculum. It's expensive, there's time involved, but that is in process and talking about that now.
Thank you, candidates. At this time, do we have any written questions from the audience? We have, it looks like, 3 written